A former casino surveillance operator just revealed something that could change how you think about walking into a casino forever. His name is Marcus, and he spent 7 years behind the monitors in a major Las Vegas casino before his conscience finally made him walk away. What he's about to share isn't about the games themselves or which machines have the worst odds. It's about something far more invasive, something most players have no idea is happening the moment they step through those doors. According to Marcus and 10 other former casino employees I've spoken with, every movement you make, every dollar you spend, every decision you think is your own, it's all being tracked, analyzed, and used against you in ways that would shock most people. Casinos don't want you knowing this information because once you understand how thoroughly you're being monitored and targeted, you'll never look at that casino floor the same way again. What I'm about to reveal are the 11 specific methods casinos use to identify, track, and manipulate you from the second you arrive until long after you leave. These aren't theories or speculation. These are documented practices confirmed by people who actually operated these systems. Let me tell you about targeting method number one, facial recognition at entry. Now, you might think you're just another anonymous face in a crowded casino, but according to Marcus and 3 other former surveillance operators, that's exactly what casinos want you to believe. The truth is far more sophisticated. Modern casino surveillance systems begin identifying you before you even reach the gaming floor. High-resolution cameras positioned at every entrance feed directly into facial recognition software that cross-references your image against a massive database of previous visitors. Marcus told me about a regular player they tracked across 6 months. The system logged every single visit, noting the exact times this player arrived, which machines he preferred, his average bet size, and most importantly, his complete win and loss history. The database knew this player lost an average of $1,200 per visit and typically stayed for 4 to 5 hours. It knew he preferred video poker machines near the sports book. It even tracked which cocktail servers he tipped most generously. Here's what made Marcus uncomfortable enough to eventually leave the industry. This information wasn't just sitting in a database. Floor managers received real-time alerts on their tablets the moment this player's face was identified at the entrance. Before he even reached his favorite machine, the casino knew exactly who he was, exactly how much he typically lost, and exactly how to keep him there longer. Former floor supervisor Angela confirmed they used this data to position themselves strategically. If a high-value player was identified at the north entrance, a manager would casually walk that direction, ready to greet them by name, offer a comp, or simply create that feeling of being a valued regular. It's not hospitality, it's calculated targeting based on your documented worth to the casino. And if you think that's invasive, wait until you hear what happens once they've identified you. That brings us to targeting method number 2, player card data mining. Every time you swipe that player's card, every single transaction feeds directly into an algorithm that's building a comprehensive psychological and financial profile of who you are as a gambler. Let me tell you about Sarah. She was a regular player at a Midwest casino who genuinely believed her player card gave her better odds, or at least better rewards for her loyalty. What she didn't understand was that every card swipe was teaching the casino exactly how to manipulate her. The system tracked her tier points, but more importantly, it calculated something called theoretical loss. This is the amount the casino expects you to lose based on your betting patterns, game selection, and session length. But here's where it gets truly manipulative. Former casino analyst Eric revealed that these systems run predictive models, identifying what they call your pain point. This is the specific loss amount where you typically stop playing and leave. For Sarah, that number was around $800. The casino's algorithm learned that after losing approximately $800, Sarah would usually cash out and go home. So what did the system do? According to Eric, it would trigger promotional offers timed specifically to arrive right as she approached that pain point. She'd be down $700, starting to feel that familiar urge to quit, and suddenly a casino host would appear with an offer. Free buffet tickets, a $20 bonus play voucher, an invitation to an exclusive slot tournament. These weren't random acts of generosity. These were algorithmically timed interventions designed to push her past her natural stopping point. The system knew that if they could get her to stay just 30 more minutes past her pain point, she'd typically lose another $300 to $500. Sarah thought the casino was rewarding her loyalty. The reality was they were exploiting predictive data to extract maximum loss from her specific psychological profile. And if you think that level of manipulation is disturbing, wait until you hear what happens when you actually sit down at a machine. That brings us to targeting method number 3, seat sensors and pressure plates. Now here's something that's going to make you think twice before you settle into that comfortable slot machine chair. Former slot technician James spent 4 years installing and maintaining what he calls the most invasive piece of technology on the casino floor. Every modern slot machine is equipped with pressure-sensitive sensors built directly into the seat. The moment you sit down, that machine knows you're there. But it's not just registering your presence. These sensors communicate directly with the casino's central management system, sending an instant alert that includes the specific machine number, the exact timestamp, and most importantly, if you're a card-carrying player, your complete profile. James told me about installing upgraded sensor systems in a tribal casino in Connecticut. The new sensors could detect not just when someone sat down, but weight distribution patterns that helped identify if the same person returned to the same machine multiple times in a single day. He said the technology was supposedly for maintenance purposes, tracking how frequently machines were being played. But the reality was far more calculated. Floor managers carried tablets that received notifications within 30 seconds of a high-value player sitting down at any machine on the floor. Let me tell you about Robert. He was a regular player who typically bet $2.50 per spin on penny slots. The casino system knew Robert's average session lasted about 2 hours, and he typically lost anywhere from $300 to $600 per visit. One Saturday evening, Robert sat down at his usual machine, swiped his card, and started playing. Within 90 seconds, according to James, who was monitoring the system that night, a notification appeared on the floor manager's tablet. Robert's player profile showed he was up $800 on his last 3 visits, meaning he was statistically due for a losing session. Here's what happened next. A cocktail waitress appeared within 5 minutes offering Robert his preferred drink, vodka tonic. 12 minutes later, a casino host stopped by to chat, asking about Robert's recent birthday and mentioning they'd comped him a room for the following weekend. 18 minutes after that, during what the system identified as a significant winning streak where Robert had climbed $200 ahead, a floor manager casually walked past and engaged Robert in conversation about the upcoming football game. These weren't coincidences. These weren't examples of attentive customer service. According to James, these were calculated interruptions timed specifically by the seat sensor data and Robert's play pattern. The system had flagged that Robert was experiencing a winning streak, and casino research shows that interrupting players during wins keeps them playing significantly longer than if they'd been left alone. Players who are winning often think about leaving while they're ahead, but a friendly conversation, a free drink, a mention of future comps, these micro-interventions disrupt that instinct to walk away. Robert played for 6 more hours that night. He left down $1,200, convinced he'd just had an unlucky session, but feeling valued because of all the personal attention. He had no idea that every interaction was triggered by the pressure plate beneath him communicating with a targeting algorithm. But here's where it gets even more invasive. That brings us to targeting method number 4, bet tracking software. Every single spin you make on a modern slot machine is being monitored in real time by sophisticated server-based systems that report your betting behavior directly to casino management. We're not talking about daily summaries or weekly reports. We're talking about live, spin-by-spin surveillance of your betting patterns. Former floor manager Angela spent 9 years working her way up through casino operations before the practices she witnessed made her leave the industry entirely. She told me about software systems that tracked not just how much you were betting, but how your bet sizes changed throughout your session. The system monitored your spin frequency, noting if you were playing faster or slower than your historical average. It tracked your session length down to the minute. But most disturbingly, Angela said the software was programmed to flag what they called tilt behavior. This is when a player starts showing signs of chasing losses through increasingly desperate play patterns. The most obvious tilt indicator is rapidly increasing bet sizes after a significant loss. Angela described a specific incident that still bothers her years later. A regular player sat down at a dollar slot machine and began playing at $1.25 per spin, his typical bet level. About 40 minutes into his session, he hit a cold streak and lost $600 relatively quickly. The system watched as he increased his bet to $2 per spin, then $3, then $5. Each increase triggered an escalation alert on Angela's tablet. The software had identified classic chase behavior, and according to internal documentation that Angela later reviewed, players exhibiting these patterns play an average of 40% longer when approached by staff during the tilt phase. Angela was instructed to send a cocktail waitress immediately. The waitress arrived within 3 minutes, offering complimentary drinks and engaging the player in friendly conversation. Angela said the interaction seemed harmless on the surface, just good customer service. But the timing was calculated specifically to keep him playing during his most vulnerable psychological state. The player stayed another 2 hours, continuing to increase his bets in an attempt to recover his losses. He eventually left down $4,300. Angela told me they received real-time alerts like this dozens of times per shift, and management made it clear that responding to these flags was a performance metric that affected bonuses and promotions. They weren't helping the players. They were identifying moments of maximum vulnerability and ensuring those players stayed in their seats long enough to make emotional rather than rational decisions. Before we go any further, I need to ask you to subscribe and let me know in the comments. Have you ever been approached by a casino host at what seemed like a suspicious time? Because what I'm about to reveal next involves psychological manipulation that several former employees say made them question the entire industry. That brings us to targeting method number 5, loss disguised as win sound programming. This is where casinos move beyond tracking your behavior and start actively manipulating your brain's reward system through deliberately deceptive audio design. Former game programmer David spent 6 years developing slot machine software before what he calls the industry's most psychologically manipulative practice made him walk away from a 6-figure salary. He told me about something that happens on virtually every modern slot machine, something so insidious that most players never consciously recognize it's happening. The machines are specifically programmed to play celebratory winning sounds even when you're actually losing money. Let me be absolutely clear about what this means. You bet $2.50 on a spin. The reels land and you win back $1.75. You just lost 75 cents on that spin, but the machine erupts in celebration. Bright lights flash, triumphant music plays, digital coins appear to cascade across the screen. Your brain registers this as a win because every sensory input is telling you that you won, even though your balance just decreased. David explained that audio engineers working for slot machine manufacturers spend months testing different sound frequencies and musical progressions to identify which combinations create the strongest dopamine response in players' brains. They're not trying to accurately represent the mathematical outcome of your spin. They're trying to trigger the same neurological reward response that comes from actual winning, even when you're steadily losing money. Let me tell you about Leonard. He was a 72-year-old retiree who played penny slots at his local casino 3 times a week. His daughter brought his player card statements to a gambling counselor after she noticed her father had lost over $30,000 in 8 months, and Leonard insisted he was basically breaking even. The counselor sat down with Leonard and explained what was actually happening. During one particular session that Leonard remembered as a pretty good day, where he thought he'd lost maybe $100, the reality, according to his card tracking, was that he'd lost $3,200 over 11 hours. How could his perception be so completely disconnected from reality? It was the loss disguised as win programming. Leonard's brain had registered hundreds of celebratory sounds throughout that 11-hour session. Every time the machine played its winning music, even on losing spins, his brain released a small amount of dopamine. That neurological response created a perception of winning that had absolutely nothing to do with his actual financial losses. David told me that during his time in the industry, he sat in meetings where developers discussed the optimal ratio of celebratory sounds to actual wins. Internal testing showed that players stayed at machines an average of 30% longer when loss disguised as win sound programming was aggressive, compared to machines where sounds only played on actual profitable spins. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had data proving that auditory deception kept people playing longer and losing more. But here's what makes this even more insidious. And this is something David said haunted him years after leaving the industry. The audio programming is specifically calibrated to create what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. Your brain starts associating the physical act of pressing the spin button with the possibility of those celebratory sounds, regardless of whether you actually profit from the spin. You become conditioned to keep spinning because your brain is chasing that auditory reward signal, not the actual mathematical outcome. Casino executives know this. Gaming equipment manufacturers know this. According to David, there are entire departments dedicated to what they call player engagement optimization, which is corporate language for figuring out how to keep you pressing that button as many times as possible, regardless of how much money you're losing. David shared internal documents from his former company showing that machines with aggressive loss disguised as win programming generated 18 to 22% higher revenue per unit than machines where sounds accurately reflected profitable outcomes. The financial incentive to deceive players through audio manipulation is built directly into the business model. And if you think manipulating your auditory perception is as bad as it gets, wait until you hear about targeting method number 6. This one involves the machine itself adjusting its behavior based on your tracked player history. We're talking about variable reward scheduling that changes depending on whether the casino system identifies you as a new player or a veteran regular. Former casino compliance officer Michelle spent 4 years reviewing technical documentation and payout reports for a major casino chain before she discovered something that made her question whether these practices should even be legal. She told me about server-based slot machines that have the capability to alter reward frequency within their legal RTP ranges based on player identification data. Here's what that actually means in practice. When you sit down at a modern server-based slot machine and swipe your player card, that machine instantly receives your complete play history from the casino central system. The game knows if this is your first visit or your 100th. It knows your average bet size and typical session length. And according to Michelle, it can adjust the short-term distribution of small wins based on that profile. New players or infrequent visitors tend to receive smaller wins more frequently during their sessions. This is classic behavioral conditioning. The machine is teaching your brain that playing produces regular rewards. You're experiencing what feels like consistent action, regular hits, frequent celebratory sounds. You're being conditioned to associate that specific machine or that specific casino with positive reinforcement. But here's the dark reality that Michelle discovered in the technical reports. Veteran players with extensive play history experience significantly longer dry spells between any wins. The machine knows you're already conditioned. You've already developed the psychological patterns that keep you playing through losing streaks. The casino doesn't need to give you frequent small wins anymore because your behavior patterns show you'll keep playing anyway. Michelle told me about a player named Jessica who started noticing a disturbing pattern. Every time Jessica visited a new casino, she'd experience what felt like beginner's luck. She'd sit down, start playing, and within the first 30 minutes, she'd hit several small wins. Nothing massive, but enough to make her feel like she was getting action for her money. But at her regular casino where she'd been playing for 2 years, Jessica would frequently go hours without hitting anything significant. She thought it was just random variance, but Michelle explained that Jessica was likely experiencing algorithmically adjusted reward scheduling. The new casinos were conditioning her. Her regular casino was exploiting her existing conditioning. And here's the part that made Michelle ultimately leave her compliance position. When she raised questions about whether this practice violated the spirit of gaming regulations, she was told that as long as the machines maintained their legal RTP percentages over millions of spins, the short-term distribution of wins was considered acceptable optimization. They could legally punish loyalty while rewarding new players because the math worked out over a long enough timeline. Jessica had no idea she was being treated differently based on her player profile. She just knew that somehow gambling felt more fun at new casinos, which ironically kept her traveling to different properties and expanding her overall gambling spending. And if you think adjusting machine behavior based on your play history is disturbing, the next targeting method involves something even more personal. Something that made multiple former employees tell me they felt like they'd crossed a line from gaming entertainment into genuine exploitation. That brings us to targeting method number 7, demographic profiling through linked accounts. This is where casino targeting moves from tracking your gambling behavior into something far more invasive, mining your personal financial data, dates in life circumstances, to identify moments of maximum vulnerability. Former casino marketing director Thomas worked for a regional casino chain for 11 years before the data integration practices he witnessed made him realize he was participating in something that felt fundamentally predatory. He told me about loyalty program systems that went far beyond tracking your play history. These programs were linked to credit bureaus, purchasing databases, and in some cases public records that revealed intimate details about your financial situation and life circumstances. The casino wasn't just building a profile of how you gambled. They were constructing a comprehensive picture of who you were, how much money you had access to, and most disturbingly, when you might be emotionally vulnerable enough to make poor financial decisions. Thomas described sitting in marketing meetings where they discussed something they called life event targeting. The system would flag players who showed indicators of recent major financial events. Someone who'd recently received a large insurance payout, someone who'd just come into an inheritance, someone who'd received a significant legal settlement. All of this information was available through data brokers and public records, and it was being integrated directly into casino marketing systems. Let me tell you about Patricia. She was a casual player who visited her local casino maybe once every 2 months, typically spending $100 to $200 on slot machines before going home. Her husband passed away after a long illness, and 3 weeks later, she received a life insurance payout of $85,000. Patricia was grieving, emotionally exhausted, and trying to figure out how to move forward with her life. 2 weeks after that insurance check cleared her bank account, she received a personalized mailer from the casino. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive-looking, with her name handwritten in elegant script. Inside was an invitation to what they called an exclusive appreciation event for valued guests. But here's what made this so calculated. The letter specifically mentioned that during difficult times, you deserve to treat yourself. It offered $500 in free play, complimentary meals, and a personal casino host to ensure her comfort. Patricia thought it was a coincidence. She thought maybe the casino just happened to send this nice offer during a period when she could use some distraction. But according to Thomas, this was algorithmically timed predatory marketing. The system had identified through linked data sources that Patricia had recently received a significant financial influx, and it had flagged her recent loss of a spouse through public death records. The marketing language about difficult times wasn't compassionate, it was calculated. Patricia visited the casino that weekend. She told herself she'd just use the free play and leave. She ended up staying for 9 hours and losing $12,000, convincing herself that her husband would have wanted her to enjoy life. She returned 3 more times over the next month, each time receiving perfectly timed encouragement from casino hosts who seemed to understand what she was going through. By the time Patricia recognized she had a problem, she'd lost $47,000 of her husband's life insurance money. Thomas told me that demographic profiling extended to other vulnerable populations as well. The system specifically targeted retirees on Social Security payment schedules. Marketing materials would arrive within days of when those monthly checks hit bank accounts. During tax refund season, particularly February through April, the casino would send aggressive promotional offers to zip codes with lower median incomes, knowing that's when people were most likely to have discretionary cash. Casino executives had presentations showing the ROI on these targeted campaigns. They knew exactly which demographic groups during which life circumstances provided the highest return on marketing investment. They had data showing that people experiencing major life transitions, whether positive or negative, spent 38% more than their normal baseline when they visited during those vulnerable windows. And here's what made Thomas ultimately leave the industry. During one marketing strategy meeting, an analyst presented findings on inheritance targeting. They'd identified through public probate records a list of local residents who'd received inheritances between $50,000 and $300,000 in the past 90 days. The presentation showed expected return rates if they sent personalized offers to this list. Thomas said the room full of marketing executives discussed this opportunity like it was just another customer segment, completely disconnected from the reality that they were targeting people who just lost loved ones. That brings us to targeting method number 8, companion play algorithms. This is where the casino system monitors not just your individual behavior, but the social dynamics of the people you're gambling with, then uses that information to manipulate both of you simultaneously. Former floor supervisor Karen spent 6 years learning to identify what the casino called companion play patterns. When two people came to the casino together, whether it was a couple, friends, or family members, the system tracked their individual sessions and looked for specific dynamics that could be exploited. The most profitable pattern was when one companion was winning while the other was losing significantly. Karen told me about training sessions where floor managers learned to intervene specifically during these imbalanced situations. The strategy was sophisticated. When the system identified that one player in a pair was down substantially while their companion was ahead or breaking even, casino hosts were trained to offer comps and promotions specifically to the winning player right as the losing player wanted to leave. The psychological mechanism was social pressure and guilt. Let me tell you about a couple Karen still remembers years later. They came to the casino to celebrate their anniversary. The husband sat at a dollar slot machine while his wife played penny slots about 15 feet away. 2 hours into their visit, the husband was down $1,800 and visibly frustrated. His wife was up about $400 and having a good time. The husband walked over to his wife and suggested they leave. He'd lost enough, he said, and they should go enjoy their dinner reservation. Karen received an alert on her tablet showing the imbalanced companion play situation. She was instructed to approach the wife immediately. Karen walked over, greeted them both warmly, and then focused her attention on the wife. She congratulated her on her wins, mentioned that they were running a special promotion for players on hot streaks, and offered the couple complimentary buffet tickets plus tickets to a show the following weekend. The wife was thrilled. Karen said she watched the husband's face as he tried to maintain his position that they should leave, but his wife was now excited about the comps and wanted to play a little longer to take advantage of her hot streak. They stayed another 3 hours. The husband eventually lost an additional $900. His wife gave back her $400 in winnings plus another $600. They left down $2,900 total, but the wife was happy because they had show tickets for next weekend, which meant they'd be coming back. Karen told me this wasn't an isolated incident. The system flagged companion play dynamics constantly, and floor managers were specifically trained to use the social bond between players as a retention tool. The most disturbing targeting methods are the ones that manipulate your basic human physiology and exploit your body's natural vulnerabilities. What I'm about to reveal made several former casino employees tell me they felt genuinely guilty watching these practices unfold night after night. That brings us to targeting method number 9, time manipulation through environmental control. Every single element of the casino environment, from the lighting to the temperature to the oxygen levels in the air you're breathing, has been specifically calibrated to make you lose track of time and stay longer than you ever intended. Former facilities manager Roger spent 12 years overseeing the environmental systems in 3 different casino properties before he finally admitted to himself what these systems were actually designed to do. He told me about sophisticated climate control, lighting arrays, and audio systems that weren't about creating comfort or ambiance. They were about disrupting your natural sense of time passage and your body's normal signals that it's time to leave. Roger explained that casino environmental design follows research showing specific conditions that keep people gambling longest. The temperature is maintained between 68 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the entire gaming floor. That's not arbitrary. That narrow range represents optimal comfort where you don't notice any physical sensation that might remind you that you have a body with needs. You won't feel too hot. You won't feel cold. You won't have that natural physical discomfort that prompts people to change locations or take a break. The lighting system is even more calculated. Roger described installing LED arrays that mimic late afternoon sunlight regardless of the actual time of day. Research shows that late afternoon represents peak human alertness and energy levels. By maintaining that specific light quality constantly, the casino eliminates the natural circadian rhythm cues that your brain normally uses to track time passage. There are no windows on gaming floors. There are no clocks visible anywhere. The lighting never shifts from bright afternoon to evening dimness to late night. Your brain loses the environmental markers that normally tell you how long you've been in a location. Roger told me about a player named Michael who thought he'd been playing for maybe 3 hours. He'd arrived at the casino at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, planning to play for a little while before meeting friends for dinner at 6. When casino security finally approached Michael because his friends had called asking them to locate him, it was 11:15 at night. Michael had been playing for over 9 hours and had completely lost track of time. He'd missed his dinner. His phone had died. He had no idea that an entire evening had passed. He'd lost his entire $6,000 paycheck from a construction project. But the environmental manipulation goes even deeper than temperature and lighting. Roger described audio systems that play background music at a specific tempo designed to increase betting speed. The music is never loud enough to be consciously noticeable, but it's always present. And the beats per minute are calibrated to create a subtle sense of urgency that makes players spin faster than they normally would. The faster you spin, the more money moves through the machine, the higher the casino's revenue per hour from your seat. Every single sensory input has been weaponized against your self-awareness. The carpet patterns are deliberately busy and almost chaotic, designed to keep your eyes moving upward toward the machines rather than down toward the floor where you might notice you've been standing in the same spot for hours. The air handling systems pump in specific ratios of oxygen that keep you alert without making you feel energized enough to want to leave and do something else. Former employees told Roger they'd watched elderly players literally forget to eat for 10 or 12 hours because nothing in the environment triggered their hunger cues until they were seriously lightheaded. But here's what made multiple former employees actually try to intervene. And this is targeting method number 10, exhaustion exploitation protocols. Floor staff are specifically trained to identify players who are visibly exhausted and target them with tactics designed to keep them gambling past the point of rational decision-making. Former pit boss Linda worked in casino operations for 13 years before the practices she was trained to implement made her question whether she could ethically continue in the industry. She told me about training manuals that explicitly taught floor managers how to recognize the signs of player exhaustion. Slower play speed, confusion about game rules they clearly understood earlier in their session, repeatedly asking dealers or attendants to repeat information, rubbing their eyes or face frequently. These weren't signals to offer assistance or suggest the player take a break. These were identified as opportunity markers. Linda described receiving actual bonuses for what management called session extension, which meant keeping tired players gambling longer. The tactics were sophisticated. When Linda identified an exhausted player, she was trained to offer high-caffeine energy drinks disguised as hospitality. She'd approach with a smile and suggest a complimentary Red Bull or espresso, framing it as taking care of a valued guest. She was taught to use specific language when players attempted to leave. Phrases like, "just one more try," or "you're so close to hitting something big," or "I have a feeling your luck is about to turn." Linda told me about an elderly woman she still thinks about years later. The woman had been playing penny slots for 14 straight hours. She was visibly exhausted, confused about her remaining balance, and had asked Linda twice what time it was. Linda watched this woman lose $4,200, which she later learned was the woman's entire monthly fixed income from Social Security and a small pension. Every time the woman tried to cash out and leave, Linda or another staff member approached with coffee, encouragement, or a comment about how the machine looked ready to hit. Multiple former employees told me this practice was what ultimately made them leave the casino industry entirely. They described training sessions where managers explicitly stated that tired players are profitable players because exhaustion significantly impairs judgment and decision-making ability. The casino wasn't protecting vulnerable players. They were targeting exhaustion as a profitable cognitive state, and staff members were evaluated on their ability to keep exhausted people gambling. That brings us to targeting method number 11, algorithmic loss recovery targeting. This is the most sophisticated and personally violating practice that exists in modern casino operations. And it's the one that made multiple data analysts tell me they couldn't ethically continue working in the industry. What happens after you leave the casino, after you've gone home and tried to move on with your life, is in many ways more calculated than anything that happens on the gaming floor itself. Former data analyst Eric spent 8 years building predictive models for a major casino corporation before the implications of what he was creating finally made him walk away from a senior position that paid over $200,000 annually. He told me about algorithms that identified what they called optimal return windows. These were specific time periods after significant losses when players were statistically most likely to return to the casino and engage in what the industry clinically refers to as loss recovery behavior, but what any honest person would call chasing. The system Eric helped develop tracked every significant losing session and then built psychological profiles predicting exactly when each individual player would be most vulnerable to targeted marketing contact. It wasn't random. It wasn't even based on simple patterns like sending promotions every 2 weeks. These were individualized vulnerability timelines calculated from 18 months of behavioral data showing when specific players historically returned after losses and what circumstances preceded their return visits. Eric walked me through how the algorithm actually functioned. A player has a significant losing session. Let's say they lost $3,500 on a Saturday night. The system immediately begins a calculated countdown. Based on that player's historical pattern, the algorithm predicts they'll experience what Eric called psychological recovery windows. For some players, this window opened 48 to 72 hours after a major loss. For others, it was 5 to 7 days. The system identified these windows by analyzing months or years of prior behavior, finding patterns in how long players typically waited before returning after similar losses. Then the automated marketing system deployed what Eric described as surgical precision targeting. Personalized offers would be generated and deployed to arrive exactly when that individual player was predicted to be most psychologically vulnerable. The offer might be $100 in free play. It might be complimentary room and dining credits. But the timing was never coincidental. Let me tell you about Victor. He was a regular player who'd been visiting the same casino for almost 3 years. One Saturday, he had a particularly brutal session and lost $8,000, significantly more than his usual losses. Victor went home devastated, promised himself he was done with gambling, and tried to move forward. On Tuesday morning, exactly 73 hours after his losing session, Victor received an email with the subject line, "We value your loyalty." Inside was an offer for $100 in free promotional play, available only that week. Victor later told a counselor that the timing felt like the casino understood him, like they knew he was thinking about his losses and they wanted to help him recover. But according to Eric, there was nothing understanding or helpful about it. Victor's historical data showed he had returned to the casino an average of 70 to 80 hours after his 3 previous significant losses. The system had identified Tuesday morning as his statistically probable moment of maximum vulnerability, when he'd be thinking about his losses but still emotionally raw enough to believe he could recover them. The really disturbing element, according to Eric, was what happened with players who showed patterns consistent with gambling addiction. The system didn't flag these players for intervention or assistance. It flagged them for increased contact frequency. Players who returned repeatedly after losses within short time windows, who showed escalating bet sizes, who visited during unusual hours suggesting they were hiding their gambling from family members, these players received more promotional contacts, not fewer. Eric showed me documentation from marketing analytics proving that offers time to psychological recovery, windows generated 34% return rates compared to 8% for random promotional distribution. The system was so effective at identifying vulnerable moments that casino marketing departments treated it as their highest performing customer acquisition tool. But they weren't acquiring customers. They were targeting people during psychological states when they were least capable of making rational financial decisions. Eric told me about presenting these findings in a corporate meeting where he suggested they should consider the ethical implications of targeting people in obvious distress. He was told that their legal obligation was to shareholders, not to players, and that as long as they weren't breaking gaming regulations, optimizing marketing timing was good business. Several former marketing employees told me they reported these practices to state gaming commissions. But most of these targeting tactics remain completely legal because they don't technically involve manipulating game outcomes or odds. They're classified as customer relationship management, not predatory targeting. Now you know all 11 methods casinos use to identify, track, and target you from the moment you arrive until long after you leave. Facial recognition systems that identify you at the door. Player card data mining that builds psychological profiles. Seat sensors that alert floor managers the second you sit down. Bet tracking software that monitors every spin for signs of tilt. Loss disguised as win programming that manipulates your brain's reward system. Variable reward scheduling that treats new players differently than regulars. Demographic profiling that targets your life circumstances. Companion play algorithms that exploit your relationships. Environmental controls that disrupt your sense of time. Exhaustion exploitation that targets your impaired judgment. And algorithmic loss recovery systems that contact you at your most vulnerable moments. This information comes from dozens of former casino employees across surveillance, floor operations, technical services, marketing, and data analysis who felt these practices crossed ethical lines that made them question the entire industry. Now you understand what they're doing and you can recognize it when it happens. But here's the truth that every former employee emphasized. Even knowing all of this, even being completely aware of every tactic, the systems are designed to work on psychological and physiological levels that are extraordinarily difficult to resist through willpower alone. If you choose to visit casinos, set strict time and loss limits before you walk through those doors and stick to them, regardless of what offers or interventions come your way. Consider not using player cards if you don't want comprehensive tracking of your behavior. Recognize that every time you're approached by casino staff, there's a high probability that approach was triggered by algorithmic monitoring of your play. Understand that promotional offers arriving after losing sessions aren't coincidences. They're calculated targeting based on predictive models of your vulnerability. Subscribe if this information was valuable to you, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever received a casino offer that arrived at a suspiciously perfect moment? And if you want to know which specific machines combine the worst odds with the most aggressive versions of these psychological targeting systems, let me know and I'll make that video next. Stay informed, stay aware, and remember, the house always has more information than you do. But now you know exactly what they're looking at and exactly how they're using it against you.